Yeah, members, you are welcome. It has been a while since we last met in class. Hope everyone is safe and alive and still kicking. Today we are going to be looking at Islam. Allow me to greet you. Good afternoon. We're going to be having Islam, paper 3. We all know the paper code is P235-3. I know you all know members that we have very many papers. We have paper 1, we have paper 2, we have paper 3, and paper 4. Out of these papers, we are entitled to pick out only 3 papers. And here we have the 3 members, and it is only paper 1 which is compulsory. However, here we made paper 1 and paper 2 compulsory, thereby allowing you to choose between paper 3 and paper 4. Today, we're going to be looking at only paper 3. Tomorrow, same time, we're going to be having paper 1, but today allow me to start with paper 3. Paper 3 is called History of Islamic Civilization, as we all may be aware, and this is the paper we are going to be looking at today. Paper 3, as you may know, is a five-block paper that normally calls for 12 questions. In your name, 12 questions are set, and out of the 12, we only pick out 4 questions. It takes you to be unlucky to miss out on the 4 questions. And I know there are those who were bewitched who cannot pick out only 4 from the 12. There are major areas that are 4 questions are got, 12 questions are got, and one is what we call history of Islam. And that ranges the time between 570 to 632 AD. That period is popularly known as the Jahiliyyah time, and normally 2 questions are set, or 1 question is set. From that, then Prophet is life. There is always a question on Prophet is life. 1 question is always set. So I'm sure before you even leave O level, you can answer that question. And then there is the area we call the Caliphate period. Just a minute. Caliphate period, normally 1 question is set. Prophet is life, we look at the Jahiliyyah time, 1 question. We all know that political, social, and economic organization of the Jahiliyyah, the birth of the Prophet, and from the birth of the Prophet, we look at what transpired, the period of combat, the period of first revelation, then we look at the period of combat, we look at the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, then after the treaty, we look at Medina conquest, Mecca conquest, and conquering of Mecca. Islam had to prosper in almost the whole of Arabia. There, we normally get question number 1. Question number 2, we look at their prophet's time. You must be knowing who Prophet Muhammad was if you want to answer that kind of particular question. Question number 3 is always on what we refer to as the Caliphate period. Caliphate period, we look at the time, comes from the word Khalifa, which means the people who succeeded the Prophet immediately after his demise. So these are majorly 4 people. 1 is Caliph Abu Bakr. Then 2 was Umar. 3 was Osman. And 4 was Ali. Basically, of all the 4, we must be knowing their biography, we must be knowing their achievement. Biography and achievement. If you are combinant with the 4, you are sure that come the end of the year, you have the question to answer. So question number 3 is always on the Crusade period. Question number 4 and 5 is on what we call the Umayyad period. I'm sure whatever I'm talking about, I know you have already covered. The Umayyad period, here we normally get 2 questions, and I know you have already studied and you have the work to that effect. Here we are looking at majorly, you need to know the origin of the Umayyads. You must be knowing who are the Umayyads. Number 2, you must be knowing factors for their rise. In other words, how did they come to existence? Factors for their rise. You must be knowing the prominent leaders amongst the Umayyads, and we must be knowing prominent leaders, and we must be knowing their organization. Organization is their setup. How were these people organized? How did they live their life? Then second last, we look at factors for their collapse. How did they collapse? And lastly, lessons you can derive. Lessons learned from their leader, from their reign. In other words, when these people came to power, when they led, we all know their time of rule was between 570, immediately after the first Caliph, 660 to 750 AD. So after living for about 90 years, what lesson do you learn from these people's rule? Once you know all this, I'm assuring you that you will be in position to answer question number 4 and number 5. 2 questions are always set there. In the interest of time, I'm rushing through what you people have covered, but I'm going to be introducing a new topic which you have to study today. I'm still giving you the paper setup. So question number 4 and 5 is always on the Umayyad time. Hope I'm not rushing very fast. Question number 6 and 7, 2 questions are put from the Abbasids. Or Abbasid dynasty. Of course, we must be knowing who are the Abbasids or the origin. We must be knowing their rise. We must be knowing the prominent rulers. Then we must be knowing their collapse. Then organization. And then lastly, we must be knowing the lessons utilized from their role. These people came in for very many years, over 400 years. So out of all the 400 years, what do you learn from their time of role? 2 questions are normally set from this area, from where that means question number 6 and number 7 is always on to this area. If you are set to study this paper and pass it well, you must be knowing the areas where questions are set, and you must revise hard to get to know how you can prosper and pass this paper very well. We have already seen 7 questions, and I know you have covered all that work. That means that you are good even to sit for the final paper. So question 7 and 8, 6 and 7 is always on the Abbasid role. Two other questions are got from the what we call the Fatimid period or the Fatimid era. Here, two questions are normally set. What must you learn? One, origin. Who are the Fatimids? Two, factors for their rise. How did they come to prominence? Three, cause. Call it organization. How are they organized? Four, prominent leaders. Five, their collapse. What led to their downfall? And then what lessons do you learn from their leadership? So question number 8 and 9 are derived from that area. Therefore, if you want to pass this particular paper, you must know who are the Fatimids, you must be knowing who are the Abbasids, you must be knowing who are the Umayyads. And then you must be knowing the Prophet's life, you must be knowing how Prophet Muhammad was born and how we received the first day and how we received the revelation. 10, 11, number 10, mostly is fought on what we call the Crusade movement. One question. So that means question number 10 is majorly dominated by the Crusade. Question number 11 and 12 is shared between one Ottoman Empire, then Safavid dynasty, then Mongols, or the people they may call the Mongolese. So here, normally two questions are derived from that area. So the last three questions are ranging between the Crusade, Ottoman, Safavid, and Mongols. I'm sure during your time of stay at Chiburi at your school, we covered almost all that. And we are left with only one, the Crusade movement, Mongols, Abbasid partly, and the Safavids and the Mongol invasion. Therefore, today, our major concern is going to be on the Crusade movement. As you may know, and from your previous study and from your previous studies, we have talked about the Crusade movement. What do I mean when I say Crusade movement? The Crusade movement, this was a movement that was launched by the Christians after being dominated by the Muslims for a long time. In 632 AD, before 570 AD, there were a number of religions in Saudi Arabia. One of the religions was that of the Jewish, another one was that of Christianity. When Prophet Muhammad came in, he introduced Islam. On introduction of Islam, Islam started competing with these local and former religions. By 600 AD, Islam had dominated the whole of Saudi Arabia. And by dominating Saudi Arabia, they ended up conquering very many areas. On conquering very many areas, at first, during the Prophet's time, he conquered Mecca. He conquered Medina. He conquered Taif, among other areas, Kaiba, among other areas. On conquering these areas now were dominated by Islam, and they were referred to as Islamic states. When he left, their companions, the people referred to as caliphs, the Orthodox caliphs or true caliphs, came in. Abu Bakr was the first. He conquered very many areas, Syria inclusive. Umar bin Khattab came in. He conquered very many areas. In fact, this one conquered up to Africa, and he conquered the North Africa. And he conquered very many other areas, including Palestine and Jerusalem inclusive. On conquering these areas, most of the Christians were not happy. Why? Because these were separate areas which were dominated by the Christians. However, on conquering these areas, much as they left freedom of worship, but they were largely dominated by the Muslims and Islam. This was not moving on well with most of the Christian leaders. In a bid to stop this, they organized what we refer as the Muslim, the Crusade movement. They did so because they wanted to fight against these people who had dominated them for a very long time and taken control of most of their sacred places. And what does that mean? They started it in order to fight and, if possible, win over the Muslims and take back control of what formerly belonged to them. In the event that happened, that followed, the Pope Urban II called upon for a meeting in which he expressed the need for the Christians to come back and fight for their formerly separated areas. He wrote this in 1092, and very many people, especially Christians, were willing to follow him up. They established their headquarters at a place called Constantinople, to which was their headquarters and the base where they based to go and attack very many other Muslim-dominated areas. That was the time of the Fatimid rule. They started, and very many people were willing to follow him, as we are going to later on see. The reasons for these crusades were political, were economic, and were as well religious. Their reasons for fighting were political, some were economical, and others were religious. We are going to be seeing how these wars were political, how they were religious, and how they were political. Why? Because some leaders political, because they were led, some were led by political leaders, and after taking control of these Muslim areas, they did not go back home and they stayed back to control these areas. That is why it's said some of the reasons for their fighting were political. Others were economic, some came to trade and secure markets, so they wanted economic gain, and others were religious. Why? Because they were begun by Urban II, who called upon these people to come and carry their own cross. As we may know, the word crusade is a Latin word which means a cross. So when the Pope Pope Urban told them everyone should carry his own cross, meaning you need to fight in the way of your Lord. So they launched him to fight the Muslims to get back what formerly belonged to them. That brings us to the reasons why the Crusades were pulled. Why the Crusades? Or the factors for the launching of the Crusades. Why were the Crusades launched? There are a number of reasons. As I've told you, some were political, others were economic, and others were religious. However, here I have a number of the reasons for the launching of the Crusade. Number one, the Christians wanted to win back their holy land of Palestine from the Muslim people. The Christians, remember, they refer to these people as a wrecked race. So they wanted to win back their areas that were formerly controlled by the Christians. So reason number one why the Crusade movement started was the Christians wanted to win back the holy land that was taken away from them. Needed to win away, needed to control the holy land. Areas like Jerusalem, areas like Bethlehem. Remember, during the time of Caliph Umar bin Khattab, he took control of areas like Bethlehem, took control of areas like Jerusalem, which were so separate to the Christians. Therefore, they were not feeling very well to look at these areas being controlled by the Muslims, Palestine, among others. What did they do? They said, let's launch a crusade to fight against these people and, if possible, take back our sacred areas. I know I bring a simple example. Look at the scenario where Mecca, Medina, was controlled by the Christians. Do you think that Muslims would fold hands and say these people controlling Mecca? The answer is no. So similarly, these people having the Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Palestine being controlled by the Muslims did not go very well to them, and they therefore had to start up a fight to win over these formerly controlled Christian areas. Then number two was the desire by the Christians to revenge on the Muslims who had dominated them for a long time. Desire for revenge. Remember, the Muslims had controlled these people for a long time. From around 635 AD, when Caliph Umar took control of the areas of Palestine, areas of Babylon and others, the Christians had accepted to be controlled by the Muslims. From that time, look at now around 1002 AD, 1092 AD. This is for sure the Muslims had controlled them for a very long time. Therefore, when they advanced in technology, they saw a need to revenge. To those of you who have realized and studied East African history, you all know the reason why the Portuguese had to come to settle the East African coast was the presence of the Arabs who had dominated them. So they wanted to come and revenge and fight against these people. So the desire for revenge was one of the reasons as to why they had to attack the Muslims. So number three was political reasons. Need for political positions. There are some members, for example, Norman Raymond, who was one of the leaders. Norman Raymond, who was one of the leaders of the Crusaders. He wanted political positions in the Middle East, especially in the Mediterranean area. That is why you see, even after the Muslims, the Christians succeeded in taking over some of the sacred areas, this man remained behind and assumed the political leadership. So one of the reasons was need for political gains and political position in the Middle East was one of the causes of the Crusade movement. Then next was the need to get markets for goods. We said some of the reasons were economic need for markets. You all recall that by this time, 1092, it was a time of industrial revolution in Europe. Most of the European nations had industrialized. And therefore, by industrializing, they could produce a lot but had no market for these goods. Therefore, they needed to go to other virgin areas areas where they had not sold items before to look for market so that they can get market for their goods. That is why he said some of the reasons for the crusade were economic. So some of these people, especially the leader, wanted to get market for their goods. Remember, at first it was only Britain, which was the workshop of Europe. But after some time, France, other areas, Prussia, Italy, other areas started industrializing. Germany, among others. And therefore they could produce a lot, but they had no market for their goods. That is why they had to venture into Asia Minor and other areas to which they would maybe get market for their goods. Then next, the other reason why the Christian Crusades were launched was the need to spread Christianity. Remember we said this crusade movement was sanctioned by the Pope to go into the areas which were dominated by the Muslims. Therefore, the need to spread Christianity was on the forehand. They wanted to control these areas, and by controlling these areas, they would end up spreading Christianity to these areas, especially the areas of the Middle East. So, one of the other reasons why they had to launch the crusade was the need to spread their religion, which was Christianity. Then during the time, there was widespread unemployment. We have talked about Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution came with negative implications. Most of the people now, because they now engaged too much into using machines, very many people now were unemployed. And what resulted was rampant unemployment. So most of these people also moved to go into the crusade, anticipating that when they get a new area this time, they will may get an avenue for employment. So unemployment caused by industrial revolution was one of the factors that later led to the launching of the Christian or Crusades. Then the other reason was Pope Urban's call. Let me wrap up this. Papa's call or Pope Urban II's call. We said it at the start of the crusade in 1092, Pope called upon his people and told them they started crusade. We said the crusade is a Latin word which means a cross. He told the Christians that why don't we carry our own cross? Why don't we fight against these people that we get back what formerly belonged to us? Therefore, Pope Urban called it upon all the Christians, and after the calling, it is said that he got about 15,000 people who were willing to follow him, and he told them, please, why don't we start a fight and to get to revenge and get back our formerly land or areas of Palestine, Jerusalem, among other areas. So, Pope Urban's call was the immediate factor for the launching of it to go and attack other Muslim-dominated areas. Then the criminals in Europe saw it as an opportunity through which they could exert self-punishment. Remember, with urbanization, it comes with related crime or criminal offenses. So these people, many of them, so it has a need for through which they would exert self punishment. So then the other factor that may have led to the launching of the crusade was the new love for adventure. Most of the people, especially the youth, loved to go and tour beyond their reach. And some of the youth followed after the Pope was called, they followed the bandwagon to go and adventure to various areas where they had not been before. Therefore, they joined their group and they were part of the 15,000 members who were gathered at once to start the fight against the Muslims who had dominated them since the time of Caliph Umar bin Khattab. So, love for adventure was one of the reasons, especially among the youth, to go and attack the Muslims. Then some people in Europe joined the Crusade movement so as to avoid problems at home. We have already cited a number of problems. We said after Industrial Revolution in Europe, very many people were unemployed. Very many people started resorting to crimes and therefore they had to come and exert self-punishment. We have said to avoid problems at home, social problems, unemployment and other problems. Other problems were some of the factors that led to the launching of the Crusade movement. Then they need to get their former privileged areas, reclaim their former sites. They wanted to reclaim some of their former sites, for example, areas of Palestine, areas of Bethlehem, and other areas and other sites. So areas of Palestine, the Christians wanted to regain their former sites, and it was one of the reasons as to why they had to start up the Crusade or the Crusade movement. Then lastly was the need to get raw materials. Or second last was the need to get raw materials. As we've already noted, that was the time of Industrial Revolution. Therefore, all the nations in Europe had industrialized. Almost all of them had industrialized. And with industrializing, it meant that there had to be scarcity of raw materials. They had to look for areas where there was no development and industrialization to which they would get raw materials to use in their former homes. So some came because they wanted to adventure and get new raw material sites to which they would help to their advantage. Then the hostile nature maybe the first Tyrone nature of Al-Hakim was the time for scramble. Time for scramble and partition. Partition. That was the time of when many of the nations were rushing, especially from Europe, were rushing to go elsewhere to get control of the new areas. That is why we refer to that time as the time for scramble, running and partitioning, meaning cutting into smaller parts of nation so that they can get raw material, so that they can get where to sell there. So it was a time of for scramble and partition. Therefore, most of the Europeans wanted to attack other areas which have not been scrambled before to take control of these areas. They wanted to take control of areas where they could sell their products and where they could exert their leadership. So the time of scramble and partition led to the Crusade movement. How? Because that was the time when they were rushing to many parts, including Middle Eastern Africa, to get land and get other areas of control where they would sell off their products. So then next was hostile nature of the Fatimid leaders. Hostile nature of the Fatimid leaders, especially Al-Hakim. This one was a very arrogant leader. It is said that he had to destroy a number of sacred places. He had to change very many sacred places. For example, he had to change a number of churches into mosques. This annoyed the leader and the pope. And this had to lead to the time of the Crusade movement. Imagine having a church, you are the head of that church or you are the head of the mosque, then a person comes in because he's your leader. He says, from today, I'm changing this mosque. It's no longer a mosque. I'm going to change it into a church. Very few would hold up their hands and fold them. Others would launch an attack. And therefore, when Allah came, one of the Fatimid hostile leaders, when Allah came, one of the Fatimid leaders changed St. John's Church into a mosque. It annoyed the Pope and it called for Pope Urban II to call for a fight with the Muslims, which we refer to as the Crusade movement. Then, okay. Then lastly is the weakening strength of the Fatimid leaders or presence of weak Fatimid leaders. The leaders were leading the Muslims at the time of the Fatimids. That was, then I remember that was the time of the Fatimid era. The leaders who came in later, especially the last leaders, were very weak. Most of them were very young. For example, if you say if you estimated that Al-Hakim came to power at the age of 11, and very many other leaders who came to power, these ones were very weak, and it gave a chance to the Christians who were organized to come and attack the Muslims because of their weak leadership of the time. So basically, those were the reasons why the Crusades were launched. And when they were launched, they were successful and they came into 4 major waves. They came and successfully fought and defeated the Muslims. However, Muslims reacted back after a long time and they fought and managed to repulse the Crusaders. And by 1115, the Crusaders were no more and the Muslims had taken back their control of these areas that crusaders normally fought for. So lastly for today, we are going to be looking at the results of the crusades or effects of the crusade movement. Basically, we started with the crusade. We've given a definition of crusade. We've looked at the reasons as to why the crusade had to happen. Why, in other words, why the Muslims and the Christians had to engage in fighting battles. And lastly, we are going to look at the results or effects of the crusade. Effect is the outcome. It is positive, it can be positive, and it can be negative. Effects of the crusades. I'm saying they are positive as well as negative effects. This is the outcome. When the Crusaders or the Christians attacked the Muslims, they had the far-reaching impact or effect. These are what we're going to look at and shall be ending with the effects. So, what would be the effect? Effect number one was loss of lives. Whenever there is a fighting, number one, you must expect loss of lives. Why? Because when they were using arms, they were not just giving them sweets and gifts to take, but they were fighting and fighting each other. It ended up in very, very many people losing their lives. Then number two, during the Crusade movement, the Europeans managed to take control of some of the Muslim areas. Europeans managed to control Muslim lands for some time. For example, Europeans, France, which sent in very many people like Norman Raymond, who was a political leader, managed to control part of the Muslim land, especially the land at the coast of the Mediterranean, Asian side. So, Europeans managed to control some of the Muslim areas. Then, number three, during the Crusade, there was introduction of new crops. Led to introduction of new crops. These people, when they are coming from Europe, they managed to come in with a number of new crops. Notable among them was millet, lemons, carrots, and many others. These plants became a basis for agriculture in the Middle East. And that is even now why today you see they are dominated with the growing of rice. That was as a result of the Crusade movement and as a result of the Europeans coming and attacking the Muslim land. It boosted the trade, led to a boost in trade. How did it boost the trade? These people came in, they interacted, Europeans and the Arabs, and ended up carrying out trade, which was a positive effect onto the Muslim world. Then it led to intermarriages, which resulted in two intermarriages. Intermarriage, the European and Arabs had to intermarry, and at the end of the day, it gave birth to people in the Middle East with blue eyes and having fair hair. Then next, it brought in new military skills. Actually, the Crusade ushered in new military skills. It brought in new military arms, it brought in new skills of fighting, which were copied by the Muslims and later used them to fight against these crusaders at the time of repulsing these Christians or these crusaders. It led to increased interaction of the Christians with the Muslims, or it brought in why? Because we said at the start only, it was estimated that around 15,000 people came in. So it brought in actually very many Christians in the Muslim controlled areas. Then, as a result of the Crusade movement, there was destruction of property. It resulted into destruction of property. Why? In fighting, even if you throw out one spear, it's a property lost. One bullet is a property lost. Therefore, when these people came in, there was a lot of destruction of property. One, infrastructure-wise, buildings had to be knocked down, churches had to be knocked down, mosques had to be destroyed. Therefore, as a result of the Crusade movement, there was a lot of destruction of property, mosques and churches inclusive. It led to improved strategies of fighting, and we have it brought in new military skills. Then next, it brought in a lot of civilization, ushered in civilization. It ushered in a new type of civilization. They brought in their development, the development they already had. For example, they had to start a number of industries in the Middle East. So it ushered in a new type of civilization. Then next, it taught the Muslims, a number of lessons. One, for example, which lesson can I talk about here? They learned from their fighting skills. That is why later on, after about 70 years or less, they had already learned their fighting skills, and they used those same fighting skills to repulse these people, to send them back to Europe where they came from. So it was a lesson too. The Muslims who had to learn, especially the fighting skills, and use those same lessons to repulse these people back to their homeland. Then it created enmity, created hostility. Between the Muslims and the Christians. So it created enmity between the Muslims and the Christians, and up to date, I think it still stands. So the Crusade movement brought in enmity and brought in hostility between the Muslims and the Christians. I think up to date they are at loggerheads. Then many historical mosques were destroyed. For example, the Dome of the Rock and Masjid Aqsa were all destroyed by the Crusaders. Then the Crusade occupation of the Middle East resulted into introduction of improved it led to widespread Christianity in the Middle East. So, on taking control of the Muslim land, they spread Christianity in most of the Middle East area, and that is why even up to date we find a number of Christians, especially in Palestine and Jerusalem. That was as a result of the launch and fighting and the control of the Christians of some of these areas for some time. Okay. Okay, members, we are going to be stopping here. Today we have been looking at number one, Crusade movement. We have defined it. 2, we have looked at the causes of the movement. In other words, why was the movement inevitable? Number 3, we have looked at the effects of the Crusades. Where we have said we have positive as well as negative effects. So inshallah, negative. If we get some other time, we shall be looking at the collapse of the Crusade, how they collapsed, and the reasons why the Muslims were able to take control of to retake and regain control of these areas which were formerly Muslim and taken by the Christians for some time and then had to rush back into the hands of the Muslims.